The bitter Alaskan wind howled across the endless expanse of white, a haunting melody that Jack Roberts knew all too well. Standing beside his truck at the Fairbanks terminal, he pulled his weathered jacket tighter around his broad shoulders, his breath forming crystalline clouds in the frigid air. The temperature display on the terminal building mockingly flashed -30 degrees, but Jack barely noticed anymore. After 15 years on these roads, the cold had become as familiar as an old friend. The terminal buzzed with unusual activity for this time of year. Fellow truckers huddled in small groups, their voices hushed as they discussed the approaching storm system. Weather reports painted a grim picture, a massive front moving in from the north, threatening to blanket the region in several feet of snow. In normal circumstances, such forecasts would delay most deliveries, but these weren't normal circumstances. "You're really going through with this, Jack?" Tom Henderson, a veteran dispatcher with salt and pepper hair, approached with concern etched on his face. "That medical supply run to Eagle Summit can wait until the storm passes." Jack's steel-blue eyes remained fixed on the horizon, where dark clouds loomed ominously. "You know it can't, Tom. They've got sick people up there, and their supplies are running critically low. Another few days could make all the difference." Tom shook his head, knowing better than to argue. In the 5 years since Sarah's accident, Jack had thrown himself into his work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. The lonely roads had become his escape, the endless white his canvas for processing grief. His reputation for taking on the most challenging runs had earned him respect among his peers, but also worried those who knew him best. Inside his truck's cabin, Jack methodically went through his pre-trip checklist. The ritual brought comfort, each item ticked off representing another small measure of control over the chaos that lay ahead. His gloved hands moved with practiced efficiency over the gauges and controls, testing systems that could mean the difference between success and disaster in the unforgiving Alaskan wilderness. A flash of movement caught his eye, a shadow darting between the trucks parked in the yard. For a moment, he thought he glimpsed a large, white-furred figure, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Jack dismissed it as a trick of the light, though something about it stirred a long-forgotten memory. The truck's engine roared to life, its deep rumble competing with the howling wind. Jack pulled out his worn leather wallet, touching the creased photograph tucked inside. Sarah's smile beamed back at him, forever frozen in that summer afternoon 5 years ago. "One more run," he whispered, though he'd made the same promise countless times before. As he guided his truck onto the highway, the first snowflakes began to fall. They were light at first, dancing in his headlights like tiny stars, but Jack knew their deceptive beauty masked approaching danger. The weather report crackled over his radio, warning of deteriorating conditions and advising against travel. He switched it off, focusing instead on the rhythm of his wipers and the steady hum of his engine. The road ahead disappeared into a wall of white, but Jack pressed on. The weight of his cargo, boxes of vital medications and medical supplies, seemed to push him forward as much as his truck's powerful engine. In his mind, he could see the faces of those waiting in Eagle Summit, the elderly, the sick, the children who needed these supplies. Their unspoken urgency rode with him, a silent passenger urging him deeper into the storm. Mile markers passed in a blur of white, each one taking him further from civilization and deeper into the vast Alaskan wilderness. The familiar landmarks he usually relied on had vanished beneath the growing blanket of snow, leaving him to navigate by instinct and experience alone. As darkness began to fall, the world outside his windshield shrank to a small cone of visibility illuminated by his headlights. Then he saw them, fresh tracks in the snow, too large for any dog, moving parallel to the road. Wolf tracks. In his 15 years of driving these routes, Jack had seen plenty of wildlife, but something about these tracks seemed different. They were deliberate, purposeful, as if their maker was following a predetermined path. As he watched, more tracks appeared, joining the first set in an organized procession that sent a shiver down his spine, unrelated to the cold. The snow continued to fall, heavier now, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone on this desolate stretch of highway. In the growing darkness, Shadows seemed to move just beyond the reach of his headlights, keeping pace with his truck. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white beneath his gloves, as the storm closed in around him like a hungry predator. If this story has captured your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Let us know which city you're watching from. Let's continue. The darkness deepened as Jack's truck crawled through the intensifying storm. The wind had picked up considerably, pushing against his vehicle with growing force, each gust a reminder of nature's raw power. His headlights caught the swirling snowflakes, creating an almost hypnotic effect that he fought to ignore. Focus was essential now. One mistake on these treacherous roads could spell disaster. The wolf tracks he'd spotted earlier had multiplied, creating an intricate pattern alongside the highway. Despite the heavy snowfall, new tracks kept appearing, defying the storm's attempt to erase them. Jack found himself checking his side mirrors more frequently, searching for movement in the darkness. His rational mind told him wolves wouldn't follow a truck for this long, yet the evidence suggested otherwise. The CB radio crackled to life, breaking the cabin silence. Breaking news alert. All routes north of Fairbanks are now officially closed due to extreme weather conditions. Any drivers still on the road are advised to seek immediate shelter. Jack reached for the radio's volume knob, then hesitated. The dispatcher's voice continued. Repeat, this is not a suggestion. Road conditions have become life-threatening. Jack glanced at his cargo manifest, thinking of the vital supplies in his trailer. The people of Eagle Summit couldn't wait for better weather. They needed these medications now. He'd made a promise, and Jack Roberts never broke his promises, not since Sarah. The thought of his late wife brought a familiar ache to his chest, but it also strengthened his resolve. Suddenly, his headlights illuminated something that made his breath catch in his throat. Standing directly in his path, unmoving despite the howling wind and bitter cold, was a massive white wolf. Its fur seemed to glow in the artificial light, creating an almost ethereal appearance. But what struck Jack most were its eyes, intelligent, almost human-like, and fixed directly on him. Jack's foot moved instinctively to the brake, easing the heavy truck to a stop. The wolf didn't flinch or retreat. Instead, it maintained its steady gaze, as if evaluating him. A jagged scar ran across its face, giving it a battle-worn appearance that commanded respect rather than fear. As Jack watched, more wolves emerged from the darkness, their shapes materializing like ghosts in the swirling snow. They moved with purposeful coordination, forming a semicircle around the front of his truck. Jack counted at least 8 of them, each powerful and lean, their fur dusted with snow. But they showed no signs of aggression. Instead, their behavior seemed almost ceremonial. The white wolf, clearly the alpha, took a step forward and tilted its head, as if trying to communicate something of vital importance. That's when Jack noticed the movement at the center of the pack. The wolves had been maintaining a protective formation, and now he understood why. In their midst, struggling to keep pace, was a wolf pup. Even from his elevated position in the truck's cabin, Jack could see the young wolf was in distress, its movements growing weaker by the minute in the brutal cold. Time seemed to stand still as Jack faced a decision that went against every safety protocol he'd learned in his years on the road. The rational part of his mind screamed at him to stay in the cabin, to wait for the wolves to move on. But something deeper, something that resonated with the loss and loneliness he'd carried since Sarah's passing, urged him to act. The alpha wolf's gaze never wavered, and in those eyes, Jack saw something he recognized. Desperation mixed with hope, the same emotions he'd felt on that terrible night 5 years ago when he'd been unable to help the person he loved most. But this time, he had a chance to make a difference. With deliberate movements, Jack reached for his heavy winter coat and gloves. His hand hesitated on the door handle as memories of Sarah flooded back. Her laugh, her smile, her constant reminder that sometimes the biggest risks bring the greatest rewards. She had always been the brave one, the one who would have jumped out of the truck without a second thought if it meant helping another living creature. The wolf pup stumbled in the deep snow, letting out a weak whimper that carried through the howling wind. The sound sealed Jack's decision. He took a deep breath, pushed open the truck's door and stepped out into the storm, feeling the sharp bite of the wind and the weight of multiple pairs of eyes watching his every move. As he stood there, snow swirling around him, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would change everything, though he had no way of knowing just how right that instinct would prove to be. The snow crunched beneath Jack's boots as he took his first cautious steps away from the truck. The wind whipped around him mercilessly, but the wolves remained still, their eyes reflecting the glow of his headlights. The alpha wolf, the magnificent white creature with the battle scar, stood its ground, watching Jack's approach with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the storm. Every survival instinct screamed at Jack to retreat to the safety of his cabin, but something stronger kept him moving forward. Perhaps it was the memory of Sarah's voice, always encouraging him to follow his heart. Or maybe it was the undeniable intelligence he saw in the alpha's eyes. Whatever the reason, Jack found himself drawn step by step toward the struggling pup. The young wolf lay trembling in the snow, its small form nearly buried by the increasing snowfall. As Jack drew closer, he could see the pup's breath coming in shallow pants, its eyes glazed with exhaustion. The other wolves shifted position slightly, maintaining their protective circle but allowing Jack to approach. Their behavior defied everything he'd ever heard about wild wolves. Yet here they were, seemingly asking for human help. "Easy there, little one," Jack whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind. He removed his outer glove, reaching out slowly to let the pup catch his scent. The alpha wolf moved closer, its massive form now just feet away from Jack. Instead of feeling threatened, Jack was struck by an overwhelming sense of trust emanating from the creature. The scarred wolf's eyes held a wisdom that seemed almost supernatural in its depth. With movements as gentle as he could manage in the bitter cold, Jack slipped off his heavy coat. The wind immediately bit through his layers, but he ignored the discomfort, focusing instead on wrapping the shivering pup in the warm fabric. The young wolf offered no resistance, almost seeming to understand Jack's intentions. As he lifted the bundle, the pup pressed against his chest, seeking warmth. The alpha wolf stepped forward, and for a moment, Jack held his breath. The massive creature came close enough that Jack could see the intricate patterns of its fur, the way the scar tissue created a lightning-like design across its face. Then, to his amazement, the wolf pressed its nose briefly against the bundle in Jack's arms before stepping back, a gesture that could only be interpreted as approval. Back in the truck's cabin, Jack carefully placed the wrapped pup on the passenger seat. The young wolf's eyes, though tired, now held a spark of life that had been dimming in the snow. Jack turned up the heater, creating a cocoon of warmth that soon had the pup's shiver subsiding. As he looked through his windshield, he saw the pack still watching, their forms growing harder to distinguish in the worsening storm. The alpha wolf remained visible the longest, its white fur standing out against the darkness. Just before it disappeared into the swirling snow, it threw back its head in a silent howl. The gesture stirred something deep in Jack's soul, a connection he couldn't explain but somehow understood perfectly. He had been chosen for this moment, for this rescue, and something told him his life would never be quite the same. As Jack put the truck back in gear, he glanced at his small passenger. The pup had managed to free its head from the coat and was watching him with curious eyes that reminded him of Sarah's, full of trust and something that looked remarkably like hope. "Well, little one," he said softly, "looks like we're in this together now." The storm raged on outside, but inside the cabin, a strange peace had settled. Jack reached over to adjust the coat around the pup, and a small pink tongue darted out to lick his hand. The simple gesture of trust brought a smile to his face, the first genuine smile he could remember since Sarah's accident. He thought about the alpha wolf's scarred face, about the way the entire pack had worked together to save their youngest member, and about the mysterious ways life had of bringing healing in the most unexpected forms. The medical supplies in his trailer suddenly felt like they weren't the only precious cargo he was carrying to Eagle Summit. As his truck pushed forward through the darkness, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he had just become part of something much larger than himself. A story that was still unfolding, written in tracks across the snow and carried on the howling wind of an Alaskan winter night. The pup snuggled deeper into the coat, its breathing becoming steadier, more relaxed, and Jack knew with certainty that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a single act of compassion. The storm intensified as Jack's truck pressed forward through the darkness, but his attention kept drifting to the small bundle of fur beside him. The wolf pup had fallen into an exhausted sleep, occasionally twitching and whimpering in its dreams. Each time this happened, Jack found himself instinctively reaching over to offer a reassuring pat, just as Sarah used to do with their old retriever Max. "You need a name," Jack mused aloud, his voice soft in the cabin's warmth. The pup's ear twitched at the sound, but it continued sleeping. Looking at the frost patterns forming on his windshield and the way the snow swirled in his headlights, Jack smiled. "How about Frost? Seems fitting for a night like this." The radio crackled with static-filled warnings about the deteriorating conditions, but Jack had come too far to turn back now. Eagle Summit was still hours away, and the medical supplies in his trailer couldn't wait. He checked his GPS, though the satellite signal was becoming increasingly unreliable in the storm. The screen flickered, showing his position on the lonely stretch of highway that wound through the Alaskan wilderness. A movement caught his eye in the rearview mirror, a flash of white against the darkness. For a brief moment, Jack thought he saw the alpha wolf running parallel to the road, keeping pace with his truck. But that was impossible at these speeds, wasn't it? Yet when he looked again, he could have sworn he saw multiple shadows moving through the trees, silent guardians in the night. Frost stirred beside him, raising its head and letting out a small yip. The pup's eyes were more alert now, scanning the darkness outside as if sensing its family's presence. Jack noticed that despite the obvious pull of the pack, Frost showed no signs of distress at being in the truck. Instead, the young wolf seemed to radiate a calm acceptance of its current situation. "You're quite the mystery, aren't you?" Jack said, reaching over to scratch behind Frost's ears. The pup leaned into his touch, and for a moment, Jack was transported back to quieter times. Evening walks with Sarah and Max, the three of them content in each other's company. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed that simple connection until now. The truck's headlights caught something ahead, a fallen tree partially blocking the road. Jack carefully downshifted, easing the massive vehicle around the obstacle. As he did, Frost stood up on the seat, suddenly alert. The pup's eyes fixed on something in the darkness, and a low, urgent whine filled the cabin. Jack squinted through the swirling snow, trying to see what had caught Frost's attention. Then he saw them, dark shapes moving across the road ahead. A herd of caribou, dozens of them, struggling through the deep snow. They seemed disoriented by the storm, their usual migration patterns disrupted by the severe weather. Without warning, Frost began to paw at the window, not aggressively, but with clear purpose. The pup's behavior triggered a memory in Jack. Sarah always said animals had a sixth sense about these things. He slowed the truck further, watching as the caribou milled about in confusion. Then he noticed why Frost was so agitated. Several young calves were starting to stray from the herd, moving dangerously close to a steep embankment hidden by the snow. Jack brought the truck to a complete stop and flashed his high beams in a steady rhythm. The light caught the caribou's attention, and slowly, the herd began to regroup, the straying calves responding to their mother's calls and moving away from the dangerous edge. As the last of them disappeared into the forest, Jack could have sworn he saw more wolf shapes in the trees, the pack still following, still watching. Frost settled back down, seeming satisfied with the outcome. The pup curled up against Jack's leg, radiating warmth through his heavy winter pants. "You knew, didn't you?" Jack murmured, amazed at the young wolf's instincts. Just like Sarah always knew when something wasn't right. As they continued their journey, Jack found himself talking more to Frost, sharing stories about Sarah, about his years on the road, about the loneliness that had become his constant companion. The pup listened with those intelligent eyes, occasionally responding with small whines or gentle paw touches, as if understanding the weight of Jack's words. The storm showed no signs of letting up, but somehow the cabin felt less lonely now. Jack checked his watch. Still hours to go before they'd reach Eagle Summit. Yet for the first time in years, he wasn't counting the minutes until journey's end. Something was changing inside him, like spring thaw breaking through winter ice. In the soft glow of his dashboard lights, with Frost's steady presence beside him, Jack began to feel something he thought he'd lost forever: the quiet joy of shared companionship. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness like dull blades, barely penetrating the thick curtain of falling snow. Jack checked his instruments again, noting with growing concern that the temperature had dropped another 10 degrees. Beside him, Frost had developed a routine of alternating between watching the road ahead and studying Jack's face, as if trying to read his thoughts. "You remind me of her." "You know," Jack said softly, glancing at the pup. "Sarah always knew what I was thinking before I did." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his worn leather wallet. With one hand on the wheel, he carefully extracted a photograph and placed it on the dashboard. The image showed a woman with laughing eyes and wild auburn hair. Her face lit up with joy as she hugged a large golden retriever. Frost leaned forward, sniffing at the photograph with interest. The pup's whiskers twitched, and for a moment, Jack could have sworn he saw recognition in those intelligent eyes. "That was taken at our cabin by Mirror Lake," he continued, his voice thick with memory. "Sarah loved it there, said it was where the world made the most sense." The mention of the cabin stirred something in Jack's mind. Mirror Lake wasn't far from their current position, maybe an hour's detour off the main route to Eagle Summit. Under normal circumstances, he would never consider straying from his delivery schedule, but these weren't normal circumstances. The storm was getting worse, and they needed a safe place to wait it out. As if reading his thoughts, Frost placed a paw on his arm and let out a soft whine. Through the swirling snow, Jack caught another glimpse of movement in his mirrors. The white alpha wolf, still following, still watching. The mysterious pack had maintained their distance throughout the journey, appearing and disappearing like spirits in the storm. "What do you think, Frost? Should we make a quick stop?" The pup's tail thumped against the seat in response. Jack smiled, remembering how Sarah always said that when in doubt, trust your instincts. He hadn't visited the cabin since the accident, couldn't bear to face the memories it held. But now, with Frost beside him and a storm bearing down, it felt right. Jack turned off the main highway onto a less-traveled road, one he knew by heart even though it had been years. The truck moved more slowly now, fighting through deeper snow. Frost became increasingly alert, nose pressed against the window as they wound their way through dense forest. The pup seemed to sense they were heading somewhere special. The cabin appeared through the trees like a memory taking shape, a solid log structure standing strong against the elements. Jack's headlights illuminated the front porch, where a wooden swing still hung, gently swaying in the wind. Sarah had loved that swing, spent countless evenings there watching the sunset over the lake. As Jack parked the truck, he saw fresh wolf tracks in the snow around the cabin. The pack had somehow known where they were heading, had arrived before them. Yet there was no sense of threat in their presence, only watchful protection. Frost stood up on the seat, ears forward, clearly excited but waiting for Jack's lead. "Well, little one, ready to see your temporary shelter?" Jack gathered the pup in his arms, wrapped once again in his heavy coat. The moment they stepped out of the truck, the wind hit them with brutal force, but Jack knew the way. Each step towards the cabin door brought back memories. Summer barbecues, winter nights by the fire, Sarah's laughter echoing across the lake. The spare key was still hidden under the moose statue by the door, exactly where they'd always kept it. Jack's hands trembled as he unlocked the door, though whether from cold or emotion, he couldn't tell. The cabin's interior was dark and quiet, preserved exactly as they'd left it 5 years ago. Even the scent was the same: pine, wood smoke, and the lingering traces of Sarah's favorite cinnamon candles. Frost wiggled free as soon as they were inside, beginning in careful exploration of this new territory. Jack moved through the familiar space, muscle memory guiding him to the emergency lanterns they kept for power outages. As warm light filled the cabin, he saw Sarah's touch everywhere. The handmade quilts on the couch, her collection of nature photographs on the walls, the half-finished puzzle still laid out on the coffee table, frozen in time. The pup's soft whimper drew Jack's attention. Frost stood by the fireplace, where a framed photo sat on the mantel. It was Jack and Sarah on their wedding day, both grinning broadly, the Alaskan mountains rising majestically behind them. As Jack stared at the image, he felt something shift inside him, like a frozen river beginning to thaw, painful but necessary. Outside, a wolf's howl pierced the night, closer than before. Frost answered with a small howl of its own, the sound echoing through the cabin's quiet rooms. Jack moved to the window and saw them. The entire pack, led by the white alpha, arranged in a semicircle at the edge of the clearing. They sat calmly in the falling snow, their presence both mysterious and reassuring, as if they had been waiting all along for this moment of return. Inside the cabin, time seemed to move differently. Jack busied himself with the familiar routine of bringing the space back to life, stoking a fire in the stone fireplace, checking the emergency generator, and ensuring the satellite phone still had a signal. Frost watched his every move with keen interest, occasionally following him from room to room as if memorizing the layout of their temporary haven. The storm outside grew fiercer, wind howling through the trees like a living thing. Yet inside, the cabin's sturdy walls held firm, creating a pocket of warmth and safety that felt increasingly like a gift. Jack found himself opening cabinets and drawers, rediscovering pieces of his past life that he'd locked away in his heart. Sarah's favorite coffee mug, still sitting by the kitchen window, her worn hiking boots by the back door, the small notebook where she kept track of all the wildlife they'd spotted around the lake. "She would have loved you," Jack said to Frost, who had settled near the fireplace. The pup's ears perked up at his voice. Sarah had this way with animals, said they could sense good souls. He picked up the notebook, its pages slightly yellowed with time, and began to flip through it. Sarah's neat handwriting filled the pages with observations about local wildlife, including, Jack noticed with a start, several entries about a white wolf she'd spotted near the lake. A particularly strong gust of wind rattled the windows, making Frost lift its head alertly. Jack moved to check the weather radio he'd brought in from the truck. The forecast was grim. The storm was expected to intensify over the next several hours, making travel impossible. His thoughts turned to the medical supplies in his trailer, but he knew attempting to continue in these conditions would be foolhardy at best. As if sensing his concern, Frost padded over and pressed against his leg. The young wolf's presence was oddly comforting, reminding Jack of something Sarah used to say, "Sometimes the path you're meant to take isn't the one you planned." He reached down to scratch behind Frost's ears, smiling as the pup leaned into his touch. A movement outside caught his attention. Through the snow-frosted window, Jack could see the white alpha wolf still maintaining its vigil at the forest's edge. The rest of the pack had disappeared into the trees, but their leader remained, its scarred face turned toward the cabin. As Jack watched, the magnificent creature rose and approached the cabin's porch, its paw prints leaving perfect impressions in the fresh snow. Frost whined softly and moved to the window, placing one paw against the glass. The alpha wolf stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, its eyes meeting Jack's with that same unervingly intelligent gaze. Then, to Jack's amazement, it settled down in the snow, clearly intending to stay despite the brutal weather. "Your family's not giving up on you, are they?" Jack murmured to Frost. The pup responded with a gentle bark, its tail wagging slowly. The scene stirred something in Jack's memory, Sarah's last entry in her wildlife journal. He returned to the notebook, flipping to the final pages. There, dated just weeks before the accident, was an entry that made his breath catch. "Spotted the white wolf again today. There's something different about this one. An old scar across its face and eyes that seem to hold ancient wisdom. Native legends speak of spirit wolves that guide lost souls home. Wonder what this one is trying to tell us." Jack looked back at the window. The alpha wolf remained in its position, a silent guardian in the storm. Sarah's words echoed in his mind, taking on new meaning. Had she somehow known? Had she been trying to tell him something in her own way? The fire crackled warmly behind them, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Frost had settled into a comfortable spot on Sarah's old reading chair, looking for all the world like it belonged there. Jack found himself sinking into the couch, surrounded by memories that, for the first time in years, brought more comfort than pain. He picked up an old photo album from the coffee table, its cover still bearing Sarah's distinctive decorative touches, pressed wildflowers, and carefully written labels. Inside were chronicles of their life together. Hiking adventures, fishing trips, quiet moments by the lake. But it was a photo near the end that caught his eye. Sarah standing at the cabin's porch railing, pointing excitedly at something in the distance. In the background, barely visible among the trees, was a flash of white fur. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the landscape. But inside the cabin, a different kind of weather was changing. As Jack sat surrounded by echoes of his past and promises of his future, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The sensation of being exactly where he was meant to be, even if the road there hadn't been the one he'd planned to take. The night deepened, and with it came an almost supernatural quiet, broken only by the crackling of the fire and Frost's gentle breathing. Jack had lost track of time, immersed in Sarah's journal entries about the white wolf. Each page revealed observations he'd never known about, detailed notes about the wolf's behavior, sketches of its distinctive scar, and theories about its presence near their cabin. "Look at this, Frost," Jack said softly, turning the journal so the pup could see. Sarah drew your alpha's scar pattern perfectly. The drawing showed the lightning-like marking across the wolf's face in precise detail. Frost studied the page intently, nose twitching, before looking up at Jack with those knowing eyes. A particularly loud snap from the fireplace drew their attention. The flames cast warm light across the cabin's interior, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. Jack found himself drawn to Sarah's old writing desk by the window, where her laptop still sat, preserved like a time capsule. On impulse, he opened it, surprised when it powered on. The solar backup system they'd installed was still functioning after all these years. As the screen flickered to life, a folder caught his eye: Wolf Research. Inside were dozens of documents, articles, and local legends about wolves in Alaska. But what made Jack's heart skip a beat was a video file dated just days before the accident. His hands trembled slightly as he clicked play. Sarah's face filled the screen, her eyes bright with excitement. "Jack, you're not going to believe what I found in the tribal archives." The elders speak of a guardian wolf pack led by a white wolf with ancient eyes. They say these wolves appear to guide lost souls toward their destiny. She paused, brushing back her auburn hair. "I've been tracking our white wolf for months now, and I'm convinced it's the same one from the legends. There's something special about this pack, something beyond ordinary understanding." The video continued, showing Sarah's research notes and theories. She believed the white wolf and its pack were more than just animals. They were guardians of some sort, appearing at crucial moments in people's lives. Jack glanced at Frost, who sat watching the screen with unusual focus, ears forward and alert. A soft scraping sound from the porch interrupted his thoughts. Through the window, Jack could see the alpha wolf still maintaining its vigil, but now it had moved closer to the door. The scarred creature sat regally in the falling snow, its breath creating small clouds in the frigid air. As Jack watched, it raised its head and looked directly at him, those ancient eyes seeming to peer into his very soul. Frost moved to the door, pawing gently at the wood. The pup's behavior wasn't anxious or distressed. Rather, it seemed like an invitation. Jack found himself moving to the door, drawn by something he couldn't explain. When he opened it, the bitter cold rushed in, but neither the alpha wolf nor Frost showed any concern. The white wolf rose slowly, taking a few steps back to create space. Then, to Jack's amazement, it lowered its head in what could only be described as a bow. Frost mimicked the gesture, and for a moment, the three of them stood frozen in a tableau that felt ancient and somehow sacred. Snow swirled around them, but Jack barely felt the cold. In that moment, Sarah's research, her observations, and her final video all seemed to converge into a single truth. She hadn't just been studying the wolves. She'd been preparing him for this moment, leaving breadcrumbs for him to follow when the time was right. The alpha wolf lifted its head, and in its eyes, Jack saw a reflection of Sarah's words from her journal. Sometimes the greatest healers come in the most unexpected forms. He understood now that his chance encounter with Frost and the pack wasn't random at all. It was part of something larger, something Sarah had somehow known was coming. Inside the cabin, the video was still playing, Sarah's voice carrying through the open door. Love finds ways to guide us home, Jack. Sometimes we just need to trust the path, even when we can't see where it leads. The alpha wolf's ears twitched at her voice, and for a brief moment, Jack could have sworn he saw recognition in those ancient eyes. Frost pressed against Jack's leg, bringing him back to the present moment. The pup seemed to bridge the gap between his past and future, connecting him to both Sarah's memory and the mysterious pack that had entered his life. As they stood there in the swirling snow, Jack felt a profound sense of purpose settling over him, a feeling that this night, this storm, this encounter had been written long before he understood its meaning. The night had reached its deepest point, that ethereal hour when the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds seemed thinnest. Jack sat in Sarah's old reading chair, surrounded by her research spread across the coffee table. Printed articles, handwritten notes, and photographs documenting her observations of the white wolf and its pack. Frost had fallen asleep by the fire, paws twitching occasionally as if running in dreams. Outside, the alpha wolf maintained its vigilant presence, occasionally visible through the swirling snow. The storm had created a cocoon around the cabin, isolating them in a pocket of time that felt separate from the ordinary world. One of Sarah's notebooks caught Jack's attention, different from her wildlife journal. This one was more personal. The pages contained her private thoughts and reflections about the wolves she'd been studying. Her words painted a picture of creatures that existed somewhere between the natural and supernatural worlds. There's an ancient wisdom in their eyes, she'd written, especially in the white wolf's gaze. When it looks at me, I feel seen in a way that transcends ordinary understanding. The tribal elders speak of spirit animals that appear in times of transition, guiding souls through periods of profound change. I'm beginning to understand what they mean. Jack's eyes moved from the notebook to Frost's sleeping form. The pup had already changed so much since their first encounter in the storm, growing stronger, more confident, yet maintaining that mysterious connection to both Jack and the wild pack that followed them. It was as if Frost existed in both worlds, much like the bridge Sarah had written about in her research. A soft whine from Frost drew Jack's attention. The pup had awakened and was staring intently at Sarah's laptop, still open to her research files. Jack scrolled through the documents, finding more videos she'd recorded. In one, she stood at the edge of Mirror Lake, speaking in hushed tones. The pack has been more active lately, especially the white alpha. It's as if they're preparing for something. The tribal histories speak of the guardian pack appearing in times of great personal transformation, when someone needs guidance to find their true path. I can't shake the feeling that their presence here is significant, that they're waiting for something or someone. Jack's hands trembled as he opened the next video file, dated just hours before her accident. Sarah's face appeared, more serious than in her previous recordings. Jack, if you're watching this, then something has happened to me. But more importantly, it means you've found your way back to the cabin, back to the story that's been waiting for you. The white wolf has been watching over this place, over us for longer than we understood. Trust what's happening, love. Some bonds transcend our ordinary understanding of the world. A sudden gust of wind rattled the cabin's windows, and Frost jumped to attention. The pup moved to the door, then looked back at Jack expectantly. Outside, the alpha wolf had risen from its post, standing alert in the snow. Something was changing in the atmosphere, a shift that Jack could feel in his bones. He followed Frost to the door, Sarah's last recorded words echoing in his mind. Opening it, he was struck by an extraordinary sight. The storm had created a perfect circle of calm around the cabin, like the eye of a hurricane. In this protected space, snowflakes fell gently, catching the moonlight that had broken through the clouds above. The alpha wolf stood at the center of this supernatural calm, its white fur luminescent in the moonlight. Around it, the rest of the pack had materialized from the darkness, forming a perfect circle. Their presence felt ceremonial, ancient, as if they were enacting a ritual that had been performed countless times through the ages. Frost stepped forward, moving with a confidence that seemed beyond its young age. The pup approached the alpha wolf, who bent down to touch noses in greeting. In that moment, Jack saw what Sarah must have seen: the sacred nature of these creatures, their role as guardians and guides through life's most profound transitions. The alpha wolf lifted its gaze to Jack, and in those ancient eyes, he saw a reflection of Sarah's understanding. She hadn't just been studying these creatures. She'd been preparing the way for this moment, leaving behind the keys to a mystery that was only now beginning to unfold. As he stood in the doorway of their cabin, watching Frost commune with its wild family under the mystical snowfall, Jack felt Sarah's presence more strongly than he had in years. Not as a ghost or a memory, but as a continuing part of the story they'd shared. A story that was still unfolding in ways he was only beginning to understand. The mystical calm that had settled around the cabin seemed to exist outside of normal time. Jack stood transfixed as Frost and the alpha wolf engaged in what appeared to be a silent communion. The rest of the pack maintained their circular formation, their presence creating a sacred space in the swirling snow. Jack's attention was drawn back to Sarah's laptop, still open on the desk near the window. Something about the current scene triggered a memory of another file he'd glimpsed in her research folder. He returned, Ed to the computer, fingers moving across the keyboard with newfound purpose. There, in a subfolder labeled Prophecy, he found what he was looking for: an audio recording of Sarah's interview with a tribal elder. The elder's weathered voice filled the cabin. The white wolf appears in times of great transition. It is said that those chosen by the Guardian Pack are meant to bridge worlds, the physical and spiritual, past and present, loss and renewal. The pack seeks out souls who have lost their way, guiding them back to their true path. As if in response to the elder's words, the alpha wolf lifted its head and released a haunting howl. The sound carried a melody that seemed to pierce straight through to Jack's soul. One by one, the rest of the pack joined in, their voices weaving together in an ancient harmony. Frost, still standing in the sacred circle, added its young voice to the chorus. Jack found himself drawn back outside, into the protected space created by the wolves' presence. The snow beneath his feet felt different here, more solid, as if the ground itself was participating in this mysterious gathering. The alpha wolf turned its scarred face toward him, and in its eyes, Jack saw something that took his breath away, a flash of the same warm intelligence he'd always seen in Sarah's gaze. The elder's voice continued from the laptop inside. The Guardian Pack carries messages across the veil between worlds. They appear to those who need to heal, to understand, to find their way forward. The white wolf, marked by the lightning scar, is said to be the keeper of wisdom that transcends time. As if responding to these words, the alpha wolf approached Jack with deliberate steps. The massive creature stopped directly in front of him, close enough that Jack could see the intricate patterns in its scarred face. Then, to his amazement, the wolf pressed its forehead gently against his chest, right over his heart. In that moment of contact, Jack was flooded with sensations and images. Sarah walking by Mirror Lake, noticing the first signs of the white wolf's presence, her growing understanding of the pack's significance, her final days spent documenting everything she'd learned, preparing a path for him to follow when the time was right. The elder's voice seemed to blend with these visions. Some bonds are stronger than the physical world can contain. Love, true and deep, finds ways to guide us even when the path seems lost. The Guardian Pack serves as a bridge, helping to complete unfinished journeys, to heal wounded hearts, to show the way forward when all seems dark. Frost moved to stand beside Jack, pressing warmly against his leg. The pup had changed during this mysterious gathering. There was a new wisdom in its young eyes, a deeper understanding of its role in this unfolding story. The alpha wolf stepped back, rejoining its pack, but the connection it had established remained, humming like an electric current through Jack's body. Sarah's final video played in Jack's mind. Trust what's happening, love. Now, standing in this sacred circle of wolves, surrounded by swirling snow and moonlight, he understood what she'd been trying to tell him. This wasn't just about saving a wolf pup from a storm. It was about finding his way back to life, about healing the wounds that had kept him frozen in grief for so long. The alpha wolf raised its head once more, but this time its howl carried a different tone. Not mournful or mysterious, but triumphant. The sound seemed to ripple through the air, causing the very snow to dance and sparkle around them. Frost joined in, its young voice stronger and more confident than ever before, and Jack felt the vibrations of their song resonating in his very bones. In this moment of profound connection, Jack realized that Sarah hadn't left him alone after all. She'd found a way to guide him back to himself, using the ancient wisdom of the Guardian Pack to light his path. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But for the first time in 5 years, Jack felt truly awake to the possibilities that lay ahead. As the wolves' song faded into the night, the protective circle of calm remained, creating a pocket of serenity in the heart of the storm. Jack stood with Frost at his side, watching as the mystical gathering began to shift and change. The pack moved with fluid grace, reforming their circle into a pathway that led toward Mirror Lake. The alpha wolf took up position at the head of this newly formed path, its scarred face turned expectantly toward Jack. The moonlight seemed to gather around the magnificent creature, creating an almost ethereal glow that illuminated the trail through the snow. Inside the cabin, Sarah's laptop suddenly came to life with one final video that Jack hadn't noticed before. Sarah's face appeared on the screen, but this time she was standing in this exact spot, snow falling gently around her. Jack, if you're seeing this, then everything has aligned as it should. The Guardian Pack has found you, and more importantly, you've found your way back to yourself. There's something I need to show you, something I discovered about our special place here by Mirror Lake. The alpha wolf began to move forward, leading the way down the illuminated path. Frost looked up at Jack, tail wagging gently, clearly understanding that this was a moment of significance. Jack grabbed his heavy coat and Sarah's journal, somehow knowing they would be needed for what lay ahead. As they followed the wolf pack's path, Jack noticed something extraordinary. Their footprints in the snow began to glow with a faint bluish light, creating a trail of luminescence behind them. The storm continued to rage beyond their protected corridor, but within it, the air was still and clear, filled with what felt like ancient magic. The path led them to the shore of Mirror Lake, where the water should have been frozen solid in the winter cold. Instead, the surface was perfectly clear, reflecting the full moon above like a giant mirror. The alpha wolf stopped at the water's edge, and the rest of the pack formed a semicircle around the shore. This lake holds secrets, Sarah's voice continued from her final recording, which Jack was playing on his phone as they walked. The tribal elders spoke of places where the veil between worlds grows thin, where wisdom and healing can flow freely between past and present. Mirror Lake is one of those places, and our Guardian Pack are its keepers. The alpha wolf turned to look at Jack, its ancient eyes reflecting the moonlight. Then, with deliberate movement, it touched its paw to the lake's surface. Ripples spread out across the water, but instead of normal reflections, they carried images. Sarah walking along this very shore, the white wolf watching from the trees. Her first encounter with the pack, her gradual understanding of their sacred role. Frost moved forward, adding its own paw to the water. More images appeared. The storm that brought Jack and Frost together. The pack's careful orchestration of their meeting. Sarah's spirit watching over it all, working through the Guardian Pack to help heal Jack's wounded heart. The pack showed me things, Sarah's voice continued. Helped me understand that love doesn't end when we can no longer walk the same path. It finds new ways to guide, to protect, to heal. I knew my time might be short, but I also knew the Guardian Pack would lead you back when you were ready to find your way again. Jack knelt at the water's edge, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch the surface. The moment his fingers made contact, the lake's surface erupted with light, revealing more images. Future possibilities, paths not yet taken, healing not yet complete. He saw himself and Frost, continuing their journey together. The pack maintaining their protective watch, new adventures and connections waiting to unfold. The alpha wolf stepped closer, its scarred face reflected in the glowing water alongside Jack's. In that reflection, the boundaries between human and wolf, physical and spiritual, past and present seemed to blur and merge. Jack understood now that this wasn't just about him and Frost, or even about him and Sarah. It was about the eternal connections that bind all living things, the sacred bonds that help us find our way through the darkest nights. Frost pressed against Jack's side, no longer the frightened pup he'd rescued from the storm, but a creature of both worlds, bridge and guardian, companion and guide. The young wolf had its own role to play in this unfolding story, helping to heal Jack's heart while maintaining its connection to the mysterious pack that had orchestrated their meeting. The alpha wolf lifted its head toward the moon and began to howl once more, but this time the sound carried a new message, not of loss or longing, but of transformation and renewal. The entire pack joined in, their voices weaving together with Frost's younger tones, creating a symphony that seemed to make the very air vibrate with possibility. Standing there on the shore of Mirror Lake, surrounded by the Guardian Pack and their ancient wisdom, Jack finally understood the full scope of Sarah's final gift to him. She hadn't just left him research about mysterious wolves. She'd helped create a path that would lead him back to life, back to love, back to the understanding that some connections transcend all boundaries, even time itself. The mystical display at Mirror Lake gradually subsided, but its effects lingered in the air like the afterglow of a profound revelation. The alpha wolf's scarred face turned toward the distant horizon, where the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the sky. The storm had begun to ease, as if nature itself recognized that a crucial transformation had taken place. Jack stood up slowly from the lake's edge, Sarah's journal clutched in one hand while the other rested gently on Frost's head. The young wolf had grown noticeably during their night of revelations, not just in size, but in presence. There was a new awareness in Frost's eyes, a deep understanding of its unique position between the wild and domestic worlds. The alpha wolf approached them once more, but this time its manner was different, less mysterious, more direct. It touched its nose briefly to Frost's forehead in what seemed like a blessing, then turned its ancient eyes to Jack. In that gaze, he saw completion, not an ending, but a circle closing to open a new one. "I understand now," Jack said softly, his voice carrying in the still air. "Sarah didn't leave us. She found a way to guide us toward healing." The alpha wolf dipped its head in what appeared to be acknowledgement, while the rest of the pack moved in closer, forming an intimate circle around them. Inside Sarah's journal, a loose page fluttered in the gentle breeze. Jack caught it before it could escape, recognizing Sarah's handwriting in an entry he hadn't noticed before. The tribal elders speak of chosen ones, humans and animals who are destined to walk between worlds, helping others find their way through dark times. The white wolf chose our land for a reason. It's been waiting, watching, preparing for something I'm only beginning to understand. Frost sat tall beside Jack, emanating a quiet confidence that seemed to bridge the gap between the wild pack and human companionship. The young wolf had found its purpose, not just as Jack's companion, but as a living link between the mysterious realm of the Guardian Pack and the everyday world that needed their wisdom. The alpha wolf began to move, leading the pack in a slow circuit around Jack and Frost. As they walked, their paw prints left that same ethereal glow in the snow, creating a shimmering circle that seemed to pulse with energy. Jack felt a warmth spread through his body, despite the winter cold, a sensation of being fully present, fully alive for the first time in years. Sarah's final video played in his mind. "Trust what's happening, love." Now he understood the deeper meaning of her words. This night hadn't just been about saving a wolf pup or discovering ancient mysteries. It had been about finding a way forward, about understanding that love continues to guide and shape us, even when its form changes. The sky continued to lighten, painting the snow in subtle shades of pink and gold. The alpha wolf completed its circle, coming to rest directly in front of Jack and Frost. Its eyes held that same knowing look that Jack had seen in Sarah's gaze so many times, a look that spoke of deeper truths and endless possibilities. Frost stepped forward, touching noses with the Alpha one final time. In that contact, something seemed to pass between them, a transfer of wisdom, a confirmation of purpose. The young wolf returned to Jack's side, but now its presence felt different, more settled, as if it had fully accepted its role as a bridge between worlds. The pack began to move back toward the forest, their forms becoming less distinct in the growing light. But the alpha wolf remained for a moment longer, its scarred face turned toward Jack. In its eyes, he saw reflected all the love and guidance Sarah had left behind, not just in her research or her videos, but in the very fabric of this place they had shared. As the white wolf finally turned to follow its pack, Jack felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. The medical supplies in his truck still needed to be delivered, and the everyday world would soon demand his attention again. But something fundamental had shifted inside him, a healing that went deeper than words could express. Frost pressed against his leg, tail wagging gently, ready to move forward together. They had both been transformed by this night of mysteries and revelations, becoming part of a story that was both ancient and eternally new. As they watched the pack disappear into the forest, Jack knew with certainty that this wasn't an ending, but a beginning, a new chapter in a tale that would continue to unfold in unexpected ways. The morning sun cast long shadows across the snow as Jack and Frost made their way back to the truck. The storm had cleared completely, leaving behind a transformed landscape that sparkled like diamonds in the early light. Everything looked different now, clearer, more vibrant, as if the night's revelations had altered not just their hearts, but their very way of seeing the world. Jack checked his watch, remembering the urgent delivery waiting in his trailer. Eagle Summit was still hours away, but somehow the delay no longer felt like a burden. The night's experiences had shifted something fundamental in his understanding of time and purpose. As if reading his thoughts, Frost trotted ahead to the truck, ready to continue their journey together. Before leaving, Jack made one final trip into the cabin. He gathered Sarah's research, the journals, the laptop, the videos that had guided him through this transformative night. These weren't just documents anymore. They were a map to understanding the deeper currents that ran through his life. As he packed them carefully into a box, he noticed one last entry in Sarah's journal, written on the very last page. To Jack, when you find this, love doesn't end with goodbye. It transforms, finding new ways to guide and protect us. The Guardian Pack has chosen you and whoever they bring into your life for a purpose. Trust in that purpose. Trust in the path that opens before you, and know that I am watching over you through their ancient eyes. This is not an ending, my love. It's an invitation to begin again. Back in the truck's cabin, Frost settled into the passenger seat as if it had always belonged there. The young wolf's presence felt different now, more assured, more purposeful. It was no longer just a rescued pup, but a bridge between worlds, carrying within it both the wild wisdom of the Guardian Pack and the devoted heart of a faithful companion. As Jack started the engine, he caught movement in his rearview mirror. The white alpha wolf stood at the edge of the tree line, its scarred face noble in the morning light. Behind it, the rest of the pack emerged briefly from the shadows, their forms solid and real in the daylight. This was no dream or mystical vision. They were as real as the snow beneath his tires, as tangible as Frost's warm presence beside him. The alpha wolf raised its head in one final howl, not a sound of farewell, but a promise of continued connection. Frost answered, its voice strong and clear, bridging the space between the truck and the wilderness. In that moment, Jack felt the truth of what Sarah had discovered. Some bonds transcend the ordinary boundaries of the world, connecting past and present, life and loss, human and wild in an eternal dance of love and purpose. As they pulled onto the main road, Jack felt a new sense of direction guiding him. The medical supplies in his trailer were still urgent, but now they felt like part of a larger purpose. One more thread in the tapestry of connection and healing that the Guardian Pack had revealed to him. Frost sat alert beside him, watching the road ahead with those knowing eyes that seemed to see beyond the physical world. In the days and weeks that followed, Jack would often see signs of the pack's presence along his routes. Tracks in the snow, glimpses of white fur in the forest, distant howls that carried on the wind. Each sighting was a reminder of the sacred trust he now shared, the understanding that he and Frost were part of something larger than themselves. The cabin by Mirror Lake became a sanctuary, not just of memories, but of continuing connection. Jack found himself returning regularly, sometimes finding fresh wolf tracks around the property, other times simply feeling the peaceful presence of the Guardian Pack watching over the land. Sarah's research became a bridge between scientific observation and spiritual truth, helping others understand the deeper mysteries that lived in the Alaskan wilderness. Frost grew into a magnificent creature, neither fully wild nor fully tame, but perfectly suited to walk between worlds. The young wolf became known among the local communities, respected as a symbol of the sacred bonds between humans and the wilderness. Children would whisper stories about the white wolf pack that appeared in times of need, guiding lost souls home. As for Jack, he no longer drove to escape his grief, but to embrace the fullness of life in all its mystery and wonder. The long roads of Alaska became paths of purpose rather than retreat, each journey an opportunity to honor the connections that bound him to both seen and unseen worlds. Sarah's presence remained, transformed but not diminished, living on through the ancient wisdom of the Guardian Pack and the devoted heart of the wolf who had chosen to share his path. And on quiet nights, when the moon was full and the air was thick with possibility, Jack would sometimes park his truck by Mirror Lake. There, with Frost by his side and the white alpha wolf watching from the trees, he could feel the truth of Sarah's final message. Love never truly ends. It simply finds new forms, new ways to guide us home, new paths to healing and wholeness in the endless dance of life. Dear listeners, we hope this tale of healing, mystery, and eternal bonds has touched your heart. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about the sacred connections between humans and the natural world. You'll find it by clicking the link to your left. If you enjoyed Jack and Frost's story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore life's deepest mysteries and most profound connections. Don't miss our upcoming content. We have so many more extraordinary less to share. Join us in the comments below and let us know how this story moved you.